It's on at Matt Black Nissan. MattBlackNissan.com on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. Sports is what we do.
You're in your car, you're in your house, you're wherever you are. You're a sports fan.
97.3 ESPN.
Because if you weren't a sports fan, you wouldn't be listening.
WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City. A town square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night, Monday edition, 97.3 ESPN. We are less than 24 hours from the first 53-man roster. Just remember, folks, whatever happens tomorrow at 4 p.m. is not the final roster. That's going to evolve over the next few days. But it gives us our first cues about what the Eagles are thinking. We'll get into that. Plus, there were some NFL moves already made today we got to talk about. We got Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press. He is back to talk about the NFL as a whole. The horrible, ridiculous situation up there in Buffalo with their punter. Jimmy Garoppolo gets a new contract from the 49ers, which has some interesting notes in it. And like I said, talk about the Eagles. Plus, I'll review the first weekend of college football. And the Phillies, well, they won 6 straight, then they lost yesterday. Now they're going on the road tonight. And I know a lot of you may not stay up late to watch them. They're going to be in Arizona for 3 days and San Francisco for 3 days. As always, you can join the conversation at 609-403-0973 on the text board. You also can DM the show through the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. So here's what you may have missed. So far, here's what we know. The Eagles have released and cut. First of all, Greg Ward is what I'm going to bring up first because Greg Ward was an injury settlement. So it does not completely remove him from potentially returning. The theory was that Greg Ward's injury, which the Eagles initially described as a lower body injury, there are different reports out there saying it's a toe injury, was supposed to be a 4 to 5 week recovery anyway. So there's a possibility that maybe he lands back on the Eagles practice squad if he doesn't hook up somewhere else in the near future. Jaquiski Tartt, the safety who was brought here to be a part of, basically a retooled defense, he's gone. They've already released him. So what does that mean for safety? Well, I think it means 2 things. One, I think that him missing time with a personal matter probably hurt his getting up to speed with the Eagles defense. I think that him missing time in training camp, plus the fact that when he got on the field, he didn't look exceptional, probably hurt him making the team. And on a roster where the Eagles are going to have to make a tough decision about Kevon Wallace, they look at guys like Reed Blankenship and Andre Sacheret as potential special teamers. Tartt was the odd man out. Now, as a side note to the Eagles releasing Jaquiski Tartt and the fact that I know hopefully no longer have to hear people on television mispronounce his name. It's not Jaquiski, it's Jaquiski Tartt. All right? I mean, for goodness sake, say the guy's name right. If you're going to be a guy on television talking about the NFL, but I digress. The guy who was released by the Ravens today could be someone the Eagles zero in on. Remember, the Eagles tried to sign Marcus Williams this offseason. He chose Baltimore over the Eagles, even though that the Eagles and Baltimore offered him very similar contracts. Then, what do the Ravens do? They just released Tony Jefferson. Now, I bring up Jefferson for this reason. If the Eagles were not happy with Tart, do they take the risk in bringing in a guy for depth purposes who I guess you would say is a better version of Drokowski Tart? Look, Tony Jefferson, before the injury, was arguably one of the top 10 safeties in the NFL. This guy, yeah, he never got to a Pro Bowl per se, but his consistent play put him in a very select tier of guys that you would want back there. Well, the problem is the injuries happened. And he was trying to make a comeback with Baltimore. Didn't work out. So at his age, do you take a risk on a guy who actually looked good in the preseason? He was a guy that a lot of people are surprised that got cut because people assume the Ravens would at least keep him to be the third safety backing up Hamilton and Williams. Well, now he's been cut. Is that a sign for the Eagles to go get him? Who else did the Eagles cut so far today? Well, they cut Jason Huntley. I'm a little surprised Huntley got waived because I feel like this team is not in love with their running back situation between Miles Sanders constantly getting injured, Boston Scott basically being the only competent guy that you can remotely rely on consistently. And on top of all of that, look at who else is out there. The other person who's out there is Kenny Gainwell. And there's speculation coming out of Eagles camp that the Eagles are not happy with his pass blocking. So I thought Huntley would make this team. Maybe he lands on the practice squad. A couple of the guys who were released, the Carson Strong, nice to know you. I mean, they gave him a ton of guaranteed money to come into camp, and reports are coming out of camp that Strong did not look good. That the guy that people saw on tape was not the guy who showed up at Eagles camp. Now, the Eagles released their backup running backs. Okay, they released Abram Smith. They released a couple guys like Tortori. So my question is, do they go out and look for a running back now to get a fourth back on the roster? I know a lot of Eagle fans out there are saying you got to get a bruising back. You got to get a guy who runs between the tackles. My question is, though, who is that guy? I know a lot of people will say Jordan Howard, but, you know, there has to be a reason why they didn't bring Jordan Howard back for this year. Do they feel like Howard is run out of steam? Do they feel like he doesn't have it in his legs anymore? Like, what is the reasoning there? There's got to be a reason why they did not bring him back. So for me, I look at the situation and say they might go in a different direction, which is where another guy who got cut today might be a conversation point. And that is a guy from our area, Raquel Armstead. Now, I will admit, I do have a soft spot for this guy because I watched him play in high school. And his story to me is one of the most incredible things I could ever remember. All right. Before Temple, he was in Millville. And he was not supposed to be the running back. He got his opportunity. He parlayed it into getting a scholarship. Went to Temple, had a nice career. Got drafted in the 5th round. And then something that was completely out of his control happened. He contracted COVID, and he had very, very adverse side effects. This was way before there were shots or anything, so you conspiracy people can throw that out the window. Before there were ever the shots and the vaccines and all that stuff, he got sick. He had some very bad complications. He tried to make a comeback from it last year, barely got a sniff of the roster, in part because Urban Meyer is a scumbag. But aside from that, he tried to come back this year. he wasn't able to cut it with the Jags when he got a real fair another shot. So I don't know if he's an answer, but I think he's at least a guy you have to look at, because when he did get playing time his rookie year, he did have some productive games. But he's not a run between the tackles guy, so he doesn't fit that per se. 5'11", 220. He's thick, he's stout, he's got some power. But listen, if the Eagles wanted that kind of running back, don't you think they would have brought that guy in already? Again, personally, I would love to see Armstead picked up by the Eagles. I'd love to see him come back to the Philadelphia area, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So that's the latest on the Eagles front. Some different things to keep an eye on. To me, Tony Jefferson is the biggest name you need to watch out for. Again, I mentioned Raquel Armstead just because of the fact that, like I said, I have a personal preference toward him. I did think it was interesting that Jags traded Laviska Shenault to the Panthers. This was a guy who was supposed to be this big-time wide receiver, and the Jags also cut Laquan Treadwell. I'm talking about a guy who's supposed to be at this first-round draft pick, supposed to be the quote-unquote best receiver in his draft class. Well, didn't work out so well for him, right? And between Shenault and Treadwell, they weren't horrible in the preseason. I mean, Treadwell caught at least one touchdown that I remember in the preseason, but neither guy was really making an impact in camp, apparently. And I guess the Panthers think that they can find some value in the guy. I mean, if they do, that's great. But I'm not going to sit here and act like this guy is going to, change the Panthers roster. I think he's just another body that they think can maybe do some things. In terms of what Armstead can do, look, I think that Armstead showed you in the preseason that he still has the ability to run the ball, okay? He still has the ability to get reps out there. The problem was he was doing a lot behind the second and third team offensive line. So am I really going to judge a guy too harshly who got the majority of his reps behind backup offensive linemen who may or may not be really good at opening holes for him? He had that one solid game, did Armstead, and the rest of the preseason, he was just kind of in there for mop-up duty. So, I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. And, of course, then there's the big moves. Jimmy G gets a new contract from the 49ers. Now, my favorite part of this contract is people make a big deal about, now he's the highest paid backup quarterback in the NFL. But that's not what I focused on. I focused on the part of the report that Jimmy G gets a no trade clause and a no tag clause. So that means two things. One, he is an unrestricted free agent who cannot be franchised or transition tagged after this year. So he has complete and utter freedom after the 2022 season to sign up with a new team for 2023. Number two, he has no trade clause. That means the 49ers can't just trade him anywhere. He's not a guy that can just be dumped off anywhere. The 49ers can't trade him to Siberia. He has to have a say in where he goes. And so that leads me to the question of, if you're the 49ers, did you keep him for something that we're not talking about? Is there a larger reason why this guy is here? So a lot to parse through with this situation. Josh Hennig hanging out with you here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. I personally would not be surprised, okay, if you have a situation where Trey Lance has a bad game this year, Jimmy G comes into a game, and people start clamoring for Jimmy G back being the starter. And it's not because I don't believe in Trey Lance, but I'm just saying I've seen this story before. More NFL talk coming up next here on 97.3 ESPN here on Game Night. And with me, Josh Hennig, Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press, NFL reporter, joins me next.
Better than that first cup of coffee in the morning. It's Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max. Weekdays starting at 6 on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Take on summer with the heroes of performance. Featuring the super turbocharged TLX, the super handling RDX, the super powerful MDX Type S, and the super shifting next-gen Integra. Unlock them all at the Acura Summer Performance going on now.
Visit your Delaware Valley Acura dealer to find your Acura today.
Chase loves soccer.
I'm Chase Greer, and I'm 12 years old.
And his dream is to turn pro. That's why Chase and his family make sure he's always having fun and squeezing out his best with Go-Go Squeeze.
Okay, buddy, let's break for a Go-Go Squeeze.
Go-Go Squeeze Fruit on the Go pouches are a nutritious snack made from 100% fruit with no sugar added.
That's my boy!
Because when you nurture your kids, you squeeze out the best in them. Squeeze out their best with Go-Go Squeeze. Not a low-calorie food. Products range from 11 to 13 grams of sugar and 60 to 70 calories per serving.
Good news, New Jersey. More residents are getting quality, affordable health coverage through Get Covered New Jersey. Established by Governor Murphy, Get Covered New Jersey offers increased plan choices and more savings than ever. If you recently had a life event such as marriage, pregnancy, or insurance loss, you may qualify to enroll now. 9 in 10 enrolling get financial help for plans that include preventive care, prescriptions, and more. And if you meet certain income levels, you may qualify for low to no-cost coverage. Find your plan at getcovered.nj.gov.
When a nasty cold keeps you up all night, Vicks NyQuil Severe gives you powerful relief from your worst cold and flu symptoms, which changes a night that sounds like this into a night that sounds more like this. Ah, that's better. NyQuil Severe. The nighttime sniffling, sneezing, coughing, sore throat, stuffy head, aching, fever, best sleep with a cold medicine. Use as directed.
O'Reilly! Stay cool this summer with AC Pro and O'Reilly Auto Parts. Right now, get a $15 O'Reilly Auto Parts gift card after mail-in rebate with the purchase of select AC Pro ready-to-use refrigerant products that include a hose and gauge. Beat the heat before you hit the road with AC Pro at your local O'Reilly Auto Parts store.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like having the best of both worlds. And if you need quality orthopedic care, that's what you'll get from Cape Regional Health System. First, you'll get the personalized orthopedic care the Cape Region has counted on for decades. And through our partnership with Penn Orthopedics, you'll now benefit from nationally ranked clinical expertise respected across the country. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit caperegional.com/orthopedics. Cape Regional Health System and Penn Orthopedics, the best of both worlds for a healthier life.
Long weekends are all about getting a little you-time. And at the Home Depot, you-time starts with you saving. Saving space with an HTX 27-gallon Tough Tote for only $13.98. Saving time with a free and fast-charging 18-volt battery when you buy select Milwaukee Power Toolkits. And saving you a trip with free delivery on over 1 million items. Do Labor Day your way with savings right now at the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
The tradition continues for the 103rd season at Douglas Fudge. Take advantage of great Douglas specials. Buy 2 pounds of famous Douglas Fudge, get 1 free. Or buy 2 pounds of Douglas Original Taffy, get 1 free. Douglas Candies on the boardwalk at Wildwood Avenue and now in Stone Harbor on Facebook, Twitter, and online at douglascandies.com.
Our own recipe, and we're sure proud of it. We make the candy we sell, so it's easy to tell the great taste of Douglas Fudge.
Every search you make, every click you take, they'll be watching you.
Tired of companies like Google and Facebook watching everything you do online? There's actually a simple solution. DuckDuckGo. It's an all-in-one privacy app with a built-in private search engine, web browser, one-click data clearing, email protection, and more, all for free. Download the app today and get the most comprehensive privacy protection with a push of a button. DuckDuckGo. Privacy simplified.
Hey, I'm Jackie, and a little thing I love about the Chick-fil-A chicken biscuit is the chicken. It is golden brown, so juicy, so delicious. It's the perfect savory start to my day.
Start your day with the Chick-fil-A chicken biscuit, available on the Chick-fil-A app. Real Chick-fil-A guests paid for their testimonial.
New Jersey car owners, with interest rates rising, the current value of your trade is about to plummet. So drive directly to Matt Blatt Nissan, because AJ the Trade Man needs your trade.
Oh yeah, it's on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
So cash in your vehicle now before it's too late and drive home in a new Nissan today. MattBlackNissan.com. It's on at Matt Black Nissan. MattBlackNissan.com. On the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here, Monday edition of Game Night, 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. Talk with Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press in just a bit here on 97.3 ESPN. Over on the text board, 609-403-0973, texter chimes in and says, how about Zach Moss for the Eagles? Buffalo drafted James Cook. Moss doesn't seem to have a big role up there, and he's a big running back. The problem with Moss is I'm assuming you're trading for him because on the Buffalo Bills website, he's listed as the number 2 back. So I am going to work under the assumption that he still does have a role up there. According to the Bills, now listen, this website could be completely wrong. I'm sure that the coaches don't sit around and discuss everything that goes on the website with the team. But if the Bills website has Zach Moss as the number 2 running back, I assume that means he's not getting cut anytime soon. You got to trade for him. Let's talk more NFL now with Rob Maaddi. Of course, he covers the NFL for the Associated Press, and he is the host of Faith on the Field, which you can hear weekends here on 97.3 ESPN. Rob, welcome back. How you doing today?
What's up, Josh? How you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. So I want to ask you about Laviska Shenault. No, I'm just kidding. Jimmy Garoppolo, that seems to be the news that's got everyone's attention. I said before you came on, Rob, the 2 things stood out to me was, number 1, no trade clause, and 2, no tag clause. So this feels like basically the 49ers handed him an opportunity to get his ticket out of town whenever he wants to get out.
Yeah, and, Josh, I think you and I spoke about Jimmy and the Niners in July, and I thought the best thing for the Niners would be to keep him on a roster, find a way to work it out. And they did. They found a way to keep him on a roster as insurance, but here's a guy who nearly led them to a Super Bowl for the second time in 3 years. He was Jakeski Tart dropping an interception away from doing that. Matthew Stafford threw a pick, Jakeski Tart dropped it, and the Rams drove for a go-ahead score. Or otherwise, the Niners would have been in the Super Bowl, 3 road wins with Jimmy G. All he does is win. That's what this guy does. So I'm not sold on Trey Lance. I'm not convinced that he's going to be the answer. I know they owe it to themselves, I guess, because they traded up for him and gave away so many assets to give him an opportunity. But they found a way to keep an insurance policy in Jimmy Garoppolo, who obviously still has to prove to other teams that he's healthy enough to be able to, for anyone to want to go out there and trade for him or sign him at the end of the year to a big contract. So I don't think you've seen the last of Jimmy G playing now in San Francisco, whether it's injury, ineffective play, whatever it may be. I'm sure at some point he'll be out there and he'll play again for the Niners. And I think for them, this is a win-win scenario.
Let's assume that, Trey Lance plays most of the year. Jimmy G hits the market for free agency next year. I mean, we talk about the number 1 free agent guy on the market next year, Rob?
Josh, I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the list of pending free agents, right? I'm not sure if there are any other quarterbacks who usually you don't get to within it. Nobody's going to become a free agent in their walk year. Teams are going to lock them up. But it depending on what that is, here's a guy who has proven that he can win. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is a Super Bowl champion type quarterback, a guy that you win because he's on your team. But I think he's a guy that you can find ways to win with, as the Niners have proven over the past couple of years. He's a guy who's I hate the term game manager, but he kind of epitomizes that, Josh, because he can manage a game. He can execute an offense. If the line is effective and the run game is working and you got innovative schemes and systems, that's going to help him. I don't think he's a guy who's going to go out there and go 35 for 42 for 450 yards. He just hasn't proven that he's that kind of quarterback. He was going to throw for 5 touchdowns and no picks, but he's a guy who can help you get to that next level and finds ways to come out on top. So I don't know that teams are going to be moving on from who they have. Yeah, he's not a top 5, top 10, top 15. He might not even be a top 20 quarterback on my list. And I don't sit down and compile those lists like a lot of people do. And maybe we will at some point. It's not a bad idea in the offseason. But he's a guy that you can win with. He's got that edge. He's got that mentality. He's done it. So if I'm a team, depending on what you have around him, yeah, you'd be interested.
I look forward to that March 2nd, 2023 article from Rob Maaddi over at the AP about where Jimmy Garoppolo ranks among NFL quarterbacks. Okay. Other news that came out today that was interesting. I think people were surprised that the Ravens released Tony Jefferson. It was like, yeah, we know he wasn't a starter, but you thought, every team could use a good third safety. With the Eagles also releasing Jaquiski Tartt, as you mentioned him earlier, is maybe Jefferson a guy who could land in Philadelphia, you think?
I think the Eagles always are a team that's on the lookout for quality depth and guys who have experience, who are winners. And I would lean towards anyone coming out of the Baltimore Ravens from that franchise. I think the way John Harbaugh and his staff build winners and the way they teach football is one of the top clubs in the league. So I would always look at a guy, if he's got anything, if you feel he's got any talent left that he can help you on the field, I would feel like he can help you off the field, in that room, in the locker room, in the D-backs meeting room, just somebody who you can lean on for information. And, hey, what was the culture like there in Baltimore? So the intangibles, the things along those lines. So I think the Eagles would certainly have some interest there for sure.
There's been a lot of rumors with the Eagles about Jalen Reagor potentially getting traded. And, we already saw, I mentioned Laviska Shenault. I meant that jokingly, but also seriously, if he's getting traded, you would think Reagor could maybe be traded, but obviously the difference is Reagor was a first-round pick, Shenault was a second-round pick. So, should we expect a Jalen Reagor trade, or do you think there's a real possibility that he makes this team?
I hope he makes the team, Josh. I've always leaned, when it comes to Jalen Reagor, I felt like it was impossible for him once you saw the success that Justin Jefferson had, because he's not Justin Jefferson. And that's not Jalen Reagor's fault. That's the Philadelphia Eagles' fault, that they made that decision, that they drafted Reagor over him. Now, that, I believe, has impacted his career significantly. And I always go back to a conversation that I had with him early. It was in his rookie year. It wasn't early in his rookie year. I think it was in December of his rookie year. And we talked about mental health, because he was wearing remember, how they do the My Cause, My Cleats every year, and guys can contribute or highlight a different nonprofit organization that means something to them. And I forget which one he chose, but it had to do with mental health. So we got on that conversation, and it was a one-on-one. He kind of opened up to me, and it seemed to me that he's a guy who had issues in that area, right? And that's why he wanted to help people in that space. And I felt those issues stem from, one, the criticism he got, all the criticism he received after coming to Philly and failing to live up to the hype. And it was still his rookie year. This was still December. This was actually after the punt return game against the Packers. So he had come off something that was a little bit of a positive for him. And I just felt like he struggled on the field, but he struggled mentally. So that's why I kind of want to see this guy get an opportunity. He may never live up to being a first-round pick, but maybe you find ways to get him the ball in space. Maybe you use him a little bit like Deebo Samuel. Maybe you hand him the ball, you pitch it to him, you do some kind of jet sweep, whatever you do to get him going. And I think he still had enough talent to be a guy who, although the Eagles thought he was ahead of Justin Jefferson, most of us didn't, but a first-round pick in the NFL. So I don't want to see them give up on him just yet. I don't think he's got a trade market, Josh. What are you going to be able to get for Jalen Reagor at this point in his career? What has he shown you to get anything more than a late third-day pick, right? So rather than take a third-day pick, you're always going to need depth. Guys are always going to get nicked and bruised, and he has enough talent to where I hope maybe you can just get some of that out of him.
Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, at Rob Maaddi on Twitter. There were two things you said that I want to track back to. The first thing you mentioned was mental health. I want to ask you, because he was part of that 2020 draft class, and people forget those rookies had no OTAs, no rookie camp. Training camps it was crazy. You know, the world was just so crazy and wild and messy at that point. And I just have to wonder if it was a different draft and in a different environment. You look at what happened with Henry Ruggs with the Raiders. You look at the fact that, you know, some of these guys from that draft class, they're having trouble like Reagor. It's not just Reagor, it's other guys too. You know, some people wonder if that hurt Tua, for example, if that hurt CJ Henderson with Jacksonville. So is maybe Reagor part of, not only be mean, but maybe like a classic example of how important environment is for these young guys?
Josh, that's an excellent point. 2020 was difficult, not just on everyone in this world. Football players especially had to go through something completely unique, right? They didn't have all of, as you mentioned, the OTAs and the off. They didn't get a chance to acclimate themselves. And all of a sudden you come in as first-round picks, and now you're thrown into this environment where you're expected to succeed. And we live in an age where people are so quick to criticize you on social media and Twitter. And we saw in Jalen's case how he would delete his accounts. He would come back. Like that's an example of a guy who, as much as he wants to say he's not paying attention, he's paying attention. What else would lead you to wanting to delete your accounts? And I think that's something that shouldn't be lost on any of us, is the fact that 2020 was so difficult for all people, society in general. We're still trying to figure out how to bounce back from that. Now, like, we can get into a deeper conversation about young kids and how wearing masks in schools and being homeschooled and all that stuff has impacted them. And it may take years to unravel that. And then you take a kid who's 20, 21, 22, coming out of college, and thrust them into that environment in a city like Philadelphia, where fans are passionate and they can be over the top, and it just adds to it. So I certainly do think that what you're saying here about 2020 and that whole draft class, look at, like you said, Henry Ruggs, Tua, what he's had to deal with, and some of these other guys. And I think we'll look back on this 2020 class and say, hey, this is why it's so important to have all the offseason, to have everything that the league does and teams do to help players get adjusted, because it's a huge transition from college to the NFL, and set them up for success.
The other thing that you mentioned about is how the Eagles can use him. And the first guy that came to my mind, I know you mentioned Deebo Samuel, but I remember Percy Harvin. You know, Percy Harvin was those freakishly quick twitch, fast guys. And Reagor's a little thicker than Harvin was. You know, I almost wonder, like, is that maybe what he could potentially be? The question, though, with that, Rob, is I look at teams like Denver. They lost a wide receiver for the year. The Cowboys, they're running out of bodies in general down there in Dallas. And I look at those teams, I'm like, why haven't they called to get Jalen Reagor? Because I think Reagor has talent. I agree with you. But, like, are these teams that could get wide receivers who are not going out and getting receiver, like, are they just that confident? Like, is Dallas that confident in Jalen Colbert? Is Denver that confident in the guys who are not named Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy?
I think that comparison to Percy Harvin is a really good one, Josh, because and Percy had some off-field stuff too, right? That he had to deal with. Now, Jalen doesn't have off-field stuff. I'm just coming to a conclusion that I think the pressure and mental health may be something that's impacted his career, but he hasn't had any legal issues or anything along those lines, and I don't want it to seem like we're saying that about him. But yeah, I think that's a good example of a guy who teams found ways to use in Percy Harvin. But when you look at, as you mentioned, the Cowboys and then the Denver Broncos, I think when teams have had guys in their building, in their system, or at least throughout the offseason, they're going to lean towards those guys being more ready to play, more familiar with the offense, have built a rapport with the quarterback, more so than bringing in a guy who at this point in his career has been labeled as a first-round bust. So it's not that he's got talent in your eyes. He's got talent in my eyes. He had enough talent to where the Eagles thought he would be a first-round pick and a guy who could really develop into a star caliber player. But other teams haven't seen that. So it doesn't surprise me that nobody's beating down the door trying to bring him in. I think there's some other wide receivers around the league who've done more, who may be available. Like, for example, Tampa Bay's got a lot of depth, right? And they're going to have to make some decisions at cut down day. And teams are going to probably want to look at some of those guys. Now, of course, you can go, well, yeah, like a Cyril Grayson had success in Tampa because of Tom Brady. Will he have success in Denver? Well, yeah, you got Russell Wilson. Or Dallas, well, yeah, you got Dak Prescott. So I think there are guys who have accomplished more that will be available for other teams, more so than Jalen.
Maybe not my best transition here, but you mentioned off the field. I have to ask you a little bit about the situation in Buffalo with the punter, Matt Ariaza. I thought what you wrote over at apnews.com was incredibly insightful, Rob, because one of the things you pointed out is that, for the Bills, they haven't come out and overtly said when they knew all the details, but the details themselves have to say something. And I mentioned to somebody on Twitter, Rob, there's 1,700 guys in the NFL who make rosters, okay? There's only 2 guys right now in the league who are being accused of these kind of things up the field. It's the Bills' former punter, and it's that quarterback up in Cleveland, Deshaun Watson. How much of the conversation needs to be not as much about what Matt Ariaza did or didn't do and when it happened, but about the fact that the league has to cut down on these perception issues?
Yeah, I think this was a difficult spot, Josh, for the NFL, because what happened, the incident occurred while he was in college, so they were limited by the personal conduct policy. And the allegations really started to come out, obviously, Thursday when the civil lawsuit was filed. Now, I don't so much blame the league for not being immediate in their action, because there's only so much they can do, and they're limited by that personal conduct policy, the CBA. But I think the Buffalo Bills, and as I wrote in that analysis piece, as soon as they learned about this, and they said that they learned about this when they were informed by the victim's attorney in late July. I believe the date was like July 30th, somewhere around there. That's when they learned about it. So they knew about it, did what they considered a thorough examination, and then elected to keep him on the roster and cut the other punter. So they knew about it. They didn't have all the details, but they knew there was something, and still yet chose to keep him on the roster. Then when more details come out, that's when they react to public backlash and now decide there's no way we can keep him. Well, that's why I believe they should have been more firm initially. The attorney had reached out to their attorney, and they didn't even talk to him. So they're trying to say, well, we couldn't gather all the information. It's illegal. I'm not a detective. We can't get all this. There was enough information there. This guy's a punter who was drafted in the 6th round pick, where you should have washed your hands of that situation the minute you found out that he was involved. Yes, innocent until proven guilty. Completely agree with that. In this is what we stand for in America, correct? Innocent until proven guilty.
Sure.
However, there is so much involved in this to where you let the guy go sort that out. Once he's innocent and can play again in the NFL, he can get that opportunity. But you didn't make a big enough investment in him to put your franchise culture on the line. And ultimately they decided, yeah, that's the case, and we're going to move on from him. But it took 48 hours, and it took 48 hours too long in too many people's minds and opinion. I know that the NFL feels strongly about these things. They've taken a stance. They proved it with Deshaun Watson, the 11-game suspension, and not settling for anything less than a $5 million fine. And I know for a fact that part of this with Deshaun Watson is making sure that this guy gets rehabilitated and goes through that and shows genuine remorse, that they wanted to see the Bills do this. They didn't force them to do it, but I know that they were pretty satisfied, I'm certain, when that came down and they released them.
Yeah, Rob, I just can't get around one thing with all of this, and that is, you have two guys who are being accused of things through civil suits. And it's like, why does it take the professional environment to take a stand for something that, frankly, should not be so desensitized by society? I mean, there are people on social media, keep screaming the words that you just used, innocent until proven guilty. And I just keep falling back on, no one's accused me. No one's accused you. No one's accused 1,600 plus other NFL player of any of these things. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that there are people who, as I've mentioned to you before, the Bible says a good name is better than great riches. The idea that your reputation, your character used to mean something, and it's like now we're turning around and making excuses for people.
And the details of this particular situation are so horrendous, so awful, that I don't see any defense whatsoever. I don't know how you can justify allowing any of these three guys to play anywhere. Clearly, this was a heinous incident, and you feel for the victim. You feel for the family of the victim, and you hope that the guys that were involved in this can get themselves right, because there's got to be something wrong if you're doing this. There's something off if you're doing this. And sadly, Josh, and the attorney for the victim mentioned this, and I've spoken to so many different people, especially females in my life, who tell you that stuff like this happens in college campuses, especially involving athletes, and women feel like their voice is not heard. They feel like they don't matter, and it's sad. It's awful. We should never stand for it. And for any woman out there, any female out there who happens to be listening, don't ever think that your story will not be believed, and allow anything to happen to you and not report it, not tell someone. This is not okay. This is not something that should be justified. This is not your fault. Anything like this needs to be treated seriously.
He is Associated Press lead NFL writer Rob Maaddi. He's also the co-host of Faith on the Field, which you can hear weekends right here on 97.3 ESPN. And I am glad to officially announce also Rob will be joining us each week here on Game Night Mondays, the day after the NFL weekend, to talk football. So Rob, thank you for jumping on today, and I appreciate your commitment to joining us each week because, hey, listen, football's back, man.
Josh, I appreciate it. Look forward to joining you every week. Look forward to having Faith on the Field on 97.3 South Jersey ESPN. All new episodes coming back this weekend, so excited for that too as well. And Can't wait to talk about some games, man. Talk about some football games coming up pretty soon.
As Allen Iverson, we're not talking about practice.
We're talking about the game.
Absolutely. Rob, take care of yourself, okay?
Appreciate it, buddy.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. By the way, while I was talking with Rob Maaddi, so Aaron Wilson, who covers the NFL, put out in a tweet, the timing of this is uncanny. He tweeted 26 minutes ago, the Buffalo Bills are not interested in trading running back Zach Moss. Odds of trading him are 0 per league sources. So, I'm sorry to disappoint the texter who texted about Zach Moss. He is unavailable for the Eagles. We'll wrap up the show on the other side. Josh Hennig hanging out with you here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle.
College football on ESPN Radio.
You and we are built for this. Georgia has won the national championship.
Defending national champion Georgia jumps right into the fire in a Week 1 showdown against Bo Nix and their Oregon Ducks. Coverage begins Saturday at 3:30 Eastern.
Listen every Saturday for the nation's top college football action on 97.3 ESPN, South Jersey's football station.
I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Did you take those big down payments?
You're darn right I did.
Your Honor, he is breaking the laws of Springfield Mitsubishi, Atlantic City. They made it clear. It's a crime to pay more than a dime. Every new Mitsubishi, 1 dime down.
Take them away. And at Springfield Mitsubishi, Atlantic City, ask for credit amnesty.
If you bring home $350 a week, you could get up to $25,000 in credit. So, what's the beat on inventory?
Other dealers are struggling, but not Springfield Mitsubishi, Atlantic City. 40 new Outlanders in stock now. An entire fleet of new and pre-owned. New Mitsubishis from just 17 grand.
It's a crime to pay more than a dime.
Every vehicle, 1 dime down.
At the all-new Springfield Mitsubishi, Atlantic City.
In Pleasantville, they service all makes and models.
Springfield MitsubishiAC.com. Springfield MitsubishiAC.com.
New 22 Mirage, 16 Ford, dine down, $249 a month for 72 months at 3% APR, plus tax tag title to qualified buyers.
O'Reilly! Improve your vehicle's gas mileage and power with Royal Purple Fuel Injector Cleaner at O'Reilly Auto Parts. And right now, buy 1 6-ounce bottle and get 1 free, plus earn double O Rewards points with your purchase. Save money on gas and boost performance with Royal Purple Fuel Injector Cleaner at O'Reilly Auto Parts or O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
You wash your hands and brush your teeth, but what about your nose? How do you clean your nose? With Navage. Navage pulls saline in one nostril, around the back of the nose, and out the other nostril, flushing out allergens, mucus, dirt, and germs, and it's why nose cleaning is the next evolution in daily personal hygiene. People try Navage for lots of reasons: sinusitis, allergies, snoring, things that make it hard to breathe through your nose. But over time, they also find that cleaning their nose makes them feel better, a lot better. Nearly 3 million Navage users have written more than 100,000 reviews, averaging 4.7 stars, saying things like, "Best product I've ever used," and "Amazing, I love my Navage." That's because Navage helps you breathe better, sleep deeper, and snore less. But the biggest payoff is improved health. Here's the key point. Navage is good personal hygiene, and it's going to help you stay healthier. At Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Bed Bath, Target, and online. Navage, Navage. Clean nose, healthy life.
Ocean Casino Resort is the ultimate fantasy draft party spot. Go for the bragging rights this fantasy football season and plan your draft party at Top Golf. Each party receives a dedicated VIP draft space or private bay at Top Golf for up to 4 hours, an ocean draft board, swag bag, championship trophy, and more. Your fantasy football season starts here at Ocean Casino Resort. For more details, visit theoceanac.com. Go to Ocean. Go for the win. Let's go! Must be 21 or older to wager or consume alcohol. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
When flying insects show up in your home, how do you get rid of them? Hopelessly clapping every single one? Aimlessly swatting back and forth? Hanging fly strips in your living room? Ew, ew, ew. Instead, try Zevo Traps. Zevo uses light, not odor or chemical insecticides, to attract and trap bugs, working continuously so you don't have to. Zevo, people friendly, bug deadly.
Now at a store near you.
You've been putting back a few, and a few becomes a few too many. For a moment, you think of calling for a ride, but nah, you live nearby. What's the worst that could happen? You get pulled over, your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you total your car, you kill someone. The results of driving drunk are tragic. That's why law enforcement is out there looking for impaired drivers to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Drive sober or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
Explore Banana Republic Factory now and enjoy 50% off everything from heritage classics to new arrivals for the season. Discover essential styles from $24.99. Find your nearest store or shop online only at Banana Republic Factory.
With GMF financing approved credit excludes Corvette and prior sales.
What you're about to hear may sound unbelievable, but every word is true. Bennett Chevrolet must clear our lot, so we must sell over 200 vehicles immediately. And to do it, we'll pay a minimum, are you ready? Bennett's paying a minimum $10,000 for any trade, running or not, towards any pre-owned vehicle in our huge inventory. I repeat, you'll get a minimum $10,000 for any trade, even the worst rusted, busted rat trap. Just get it to Bennett Chevy now, because it's worth at least $10,000 today. Just imagine how much you're going to get if you have a good trade. Bennett Chevy must blow out truckloads of the all-new Chevy Silverado at thousands below MSRP. Yes, thousands below sticker. And every other new Chevy will be sold at MSRP, not a penny more. There's available 0% financing. Plus, there's never any hassles because Bennett Chevy's non-commissioned sales team is paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. Find new roads at Bennett Chevy, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
All right, wrapping up the show, let's squeeze in a couple more messages and a little recap of the college football weekend here on Monday Game Night. Looking forward to have Rob Maaddi each week throughout the season. Rob does great work. So really appreciate him jumping on here on Game Night. Over on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, L from Avalon chimes in and says, touching on what you guys said about Rager and the mental health 2020 season, Rager was dealing with a non-transition years. Both were talking about 2021 season. He dealt with his best friend dying during training camp. So it's from L from Avalon saying, Rager's had to deal with a lot here. And listen, there may be something to that. L goes on to say, he has yet to have a normal season. I'd be willing to bet that his struggles are more behind the scenes and maybe mental health than we actually saw on the field. It's a good message from Ellen Avalon. It's one of those things where we as a society don't always factor in a person's personal life into how it impacts their professional life. And athletes, we tend to treat them like robots sometimes. Look, I'm not excusing everything with Rager. Rager has not always handled things well. All right. But I think there is something to be said with the fact that I think he could be a Percy Harvey weapon. I don't think he's a one receiver. I don't think he's a two. But I think if you saw Rager play at TCU, you always thought that he could be that, kick, punt, return kind of guy who was a slot receiver in the NFL. Did the Eagles overdraft him? Sure. Should they draft Justin Jefferson? Yes. That's obvious. Okay. But the reality is that there may be talent there that's been untapped with him. And listen, if you're a Philadelphia fan, you don't want to see that guy go somewhere else and have a really good career. And then you start shaking your fist at the TV screen every time you see him and say, that could have been our guy. Over on the text board at 609-403-0973. Texter chimes in and says, what about trading Dillard or Rager to the Bears for David Montgomery? I like the idea of Montgomery. I know that his role in Chicago has been extremely phased out. The Bears need wide receivers and offensive linemen. The problem with the Bears is their GM smart enough to put down the chips, as you saw on Monday Night Football's broadcast in the preseason, and actually pick up the phone and call Howie? I mean, that dude was chowing down harder than anybody I've ever seen at a buffet. I mean, he was pounding those snacks during that preseason game. Holy Toledo. All right, college football over the weekend. I finished 4-3 for the first weekend of the year. We nailed the Northwestern covering 13 We missed on the Northwestern Nebraska going over 52.5. I thought it was going to be a low-scoring game, but it wasn't. How about UConn covering the plus 24 on the spread? Illinois destroyed Wyoming covering the 14 on their spread. Bad beat on Charlotte FAU, not hitting the over 60. Those teams just stopped playing, it seemed like. It was ridiculous. Complete miss on my part, though. Hawaii plus 9. I didn't realize Hawaii's quarterback was that poor and their defense didn't know how to tackle, but we did hit on the over 54.5. So 4-3, first weekend of college football. Not bad for a guy like me, at Josh Hennig on Twitter. Have a great night, everybody. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Hey, it's Tom P., host of Rack and Fin Radio, inviting you to join me every Saturday morning at 7 here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Each week, we discuss the hot topics affecting the sportsmen and sportswomen in New Jersey. Hunting, fishing, boating, conservation, and Second Amendment topics are some of the issues that are covered in depth.
Rack and Fin Radio is sponsored by Holtz Boatworks and Batteries Plus Bulbs. Check out Rack and Fin Radio every Saturday morning at 7 on 97.3 ESPN FM, South Jersey sports leader.